All right, since it's 12 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and get started, as I always promise, to start and finish on time. And we'll hope that you and audio pin will suffice for him when he joins us. So everyone, welcome to the TEDx Learning Series. My name is Ruth Milligan. I'll do some introductions in a second. And let's see. I apologize for the last little detail here that we're working on. I'm going to, there we go. You and I'm going to keep trying here, but we're going to go ahead and get started and let Mackenzie do his part. And if by the time we talk with you, you're not on, we will find an alternative. So what we're going to do today is feature a few people who've run TEDxYouth events. And it looks like we also have the TEDxYouth Day Coordinator, Chloe, on the line with us. Welcome. And we will give you a chance to share some thoughts, Chloe, when we get through our deck. So before we get started, I'd just like to make sure everyone knows how this works. There's a little dashboard on the side. I will do my best to monitor the questions and chats that you send me. I am doing this alone, so please be patient if your question doesn't get answered right away. And so what we want to do now is just share with you who is hopefully on the call with us. And I know that Mackenzie Haber, who is from TEDxYouth at Homer, which is in Homer, Alaska. Mackenzie, welcome.
Hello, Ruth. And everyone.
And great. And Ewan McIntosh, who is from Scotland, is, like I said, hopefully going to be joining us here shortly. So we're going to go ahead and get started with, I like to start every webinar with a little poll. So if you would think about this question, which is quite simple actually. Go ahead and answer this if you would, for everyone out there. Have you hosted your first TEDxYouth or TEDx Kids event? I'd love to know who's on the call today. Let's see, maybe a few more people could participate. It looks like 86% of you are planning your first event, and 14% have already planned one. So we have a bunch of people who are eager to learn from our panelists. So thank you for doing that. So now that we know who you are, let us just tell you a little about one more little housekeeping item here. And my screen is taking its time to share. There we go. So as I said, just remember, questions can be posted throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to address them at the end. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on the TEDx resources page within TED.com, if all goes well. Oh, and I just lost my screen. That wasn't good. And again, I know that a few of you, one of you is having a hard time getting in. I'm going to do my best to troubleshoot that as well as go along. So let's go ahead and get started with Mackenzie.
Okay.
So before Mackenzie actually gives his talk, I just want to talk to you about the difference between a TEDx Youth and Kids. Sorry, Mackenzie. And the biggest difference is that we follow the same rules as a TEDx event. We're just going to be very specific on how a TEDx Youth event looks that's crafted to be resonating with the youth, making sure the youth are involved, and having a great outcome altogether. A TEDxYouth event will have shorter events. Overall, where a TEDx event might be all day, a TEDxYouth event might be half day. Most of the talks that you'll have on a TEDxYouth will be shorter. There'll be lots more demonstrations and performances, and you'll have lots and lots of audience interaction. So we just wanted to frame for you today the differences for those of you that might have attended a regular TEDx event and or organizing. So now, here is Mackenzie. So we have the privilege and pleasure of having Mackenzie on the phone for two reasons. Number one, he actually just hosted his event on Sunday. And number two, as we speak, he's supposed to be starting school this morning. So welcome, Mackenzie. We're glad you're with us. Before we get into your, he has two lists of things that he'd like to share. I'd like you just to tell us what the greatest outcome it was for you hosting this event.
Well, my greatest outcome was finally downloaded my app that I had been making for weeks just for the event. I spent hours and hours and hours making it and planning it and inputting my speakers and the agenda. And if any TEDx organizers out there want to, AppBaker is making free apps for any. Yeah, so that was my biggest accomplishment for the event, and I also had a great time when I saw how many people showed up for the event and just how many people were there supporting our community.
So, Mackenzie, you're cutting in and out. So let's make sure you're close to your microphone so you can speak right into it.
Did you get what I said, though?
I didn't, so why don't you repeat that again, please?
Okay, well, my greatest outcome was when I finally downloaded my app on my iPhone that I had been making for weeks. I spent hours and hours just working on this app, constantly inserting information that I have for the event. And if any TEDx organizer out there wants an app for the event, AppBaker is offering free apps for any TEDx event that wants one.
Great. So what we'll do, Mackenzie, is we'll make sure that that's posted. That link is posted after the webinar. Okay. So what we want to do now is talk to you about what, besides doing your app, tell us about organizing the event and maybe one of the greatest barriers that you had that you hope another TEDx youth organizer won't go through.
Well, I think one of the barriers that I faced was being so far away from the mainland of my country. And the way I got over this barrier is I used technologies like Skype and other things like that in order to get people to my conference virtually without them actually being there in reality.
So we should explain to people that you don't live in Homer full-time, correct? You live in California.
Right. I'm in
California. You were in
right now.
So you were doing the Homer event long distance.
I was in Homer when the event was going on. I lived there over the summer to organize the event, and over the winter I have Skype calls once a month to organize the event and also to make sure we have everything running smoothly.
So Mackenzie, tell us, how many speakers did you have and how long was your event?
We had 10 speakers this year, and our event was 8.5 hours. It started at 1 and ended at 9:30, and then we had an after party at a local restaurant where we had food and music and a place for people to talk and talk about what they learned at the event.
And what was your theme? I see it here on the screen. Can you tell me what that meant?
Heart Matters. It's kind of a play on words. Homer and art is really connected, and we just wanted to make this event about passion and what matters to people's hearts, not what they did, but why they did it and why it mattered to them so much.
Great. So let's go ahead and move down to you have your Mackenzie organizing list that I'd like to share. And you called these your easy to do. So let's go ahead and just go through them quickly. So if you're first time organizer, Mackenzie wants to share with you his top list of how to organize a TEDx youth event. So Mackenzie.
Okay, so the first step is applying. If you go to TED.com, you can apply to get a TEDx license, which is very important. It gives you and your TEDx event credibility. And then you also have to read the TEDx handbook, which is a long process that I'm currently trying to turn into an app, which will make it easier. And then you have to gather. You have to get your team, and you also have to get adult allies that will help you organize the event, drive you around to get places, help you with logistics, and give you credibility. And then you have to set meetings, because it's got to be running smoothly and on time, and you have to budget everything that you're doing. And then you have to place roles. You have to find out where your team's strong points are, who can be best at what, and then you have theme and the talks, which I suggest that you start maybe even a year in advance, so you can know and be planning ahead. You have to recruit your partners and your sponsors and your speakers, and you have to market your audience by putting flyers up and sending emails out. Just everything has to be done ahead of time. Then you have to design. You have to make a logo, maybe a website. Our event had our own T-shirts for 2 years in a row, and we have posters and an app. Then you have to rehearse. We've been rehearsing with our speakers and doing practice Skype calls, and then also the day before the event we had a full run-through of the event. And then you have to enjoy. You have to be there and be happy and be watching your event. And if you're happy and you're liking the event, then other people are gonna notice that, and they're gonna want to come out to it. And then you have to thank everybody. You got to thank everybody for coming out of their way to be at your event, watching you show what matters to you. And then in order to finish, you have to archive your talks on your website and to YouTube and to the TEDx site. And then what we did is we took a survey, and then you have to pick your next team for the next year and start over the process of picking your talks and your speakers.
Great. So, quick question: how many people were on your team, Mackenzie?
I had last year I had 4 other people that were on my team, and this year I think we expanded it to 8 youth.
And were there any adults involved in your planning at all?
Oh yeah, we had quite a few adults. My mom, most of my youth team's parents were involved. We have Bob, who is our technical organizer, and we really needed them to put the event together, seeing as we don't have driving license and we don't have a way to get anywhere, and they just help with logistics and giving credibility to your event, having an adult help with that.
Okay, great. The other thing that we want to talk about is how to host as a youth, meaning when you are on stage, what are some of the things that you should do?
Well,
so why don't you go through this and tell us what it's like when you're actually on stage hosting.
Okay, hold on a second. Okay, well, I think that the 3 most important parts of hosting are to be on time, because when you're on time, it all runs together smoothly. If you get off schedule, it might make people uneasy. They might have something they need to do afterwards, and if you're not on time, you can either stall to make up, like to slow down, or you can speed up to make up some time. And you should have fun. If you're having fun, you're being yourself, the audience is enjoying you, you can interact with them, ask questions, tell jokes. Just make sure you're having a good time, and the audience will have a good time too. And another very important part is to know the speakers and talks very well, to memorize their bios, and to be able to introduce them without even thoughts of not knowing who they are or what they've done, because it's very important to the audience to know that you are knowledgeable about your event. And then you have to make them feel comfortable and thank them, because like I said before, they're coming out of their way to be there.
Great. Awesome. It sounds like you had a terrific time doing your event.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of people come out, and I can't wait to do it next year at TEDx Homer Let's Play.
Great. Well, Mackenzie, thanks so much for sharing your story, and we'll have a chance for people to ask you some questions at the end. Now, in the interest of Ewan, who is on the line with us, congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Talk about the trials of technology. But
That's
we're
right.
here.
So we're gonna let Ewan do his piece because he's calling in. He wasn't able to use the UK number, so he's calling in long distance from Scotland, right, Ewan?
That's right. Well, actually, I'm in England today, and it's fantastic seeing this webinar with photographs from the TEDx Kid event that I can't really say helped to do because it was very much in the students' hands, but those are the very students that pulled it together, and I've just spent the day with them here in Newcastle in the northeast of England.
Great. So let's go ahead. Ewan's put together some really great learning moments from him. So before you go forth, tell us your role. Were you a TEDx organizer before, or is this your first TEDx event?
This is my first TEDx event, my first TED event, if you like. The closest I had come to the events before was very much as a spectator. I was asked by the school to come and help them improve on some work they had been doing already on the confidence of their 7- and 8-year-olds in speaking and listening skills. They're two very hard skills to develop in a school environment. So I came along to do that and started off using things like video games as a context for creative writing, and we looked at the structure of great stories. But out of that, as part of my kind of classroom routine, I was showing them TED Talks and TEDx Talks. And when they saw the first talk, they were absolutely dead set on what they wanted to do. They wanted to develop their own TEDx Talks. They wanted to develop their own TEDx event, and they wanted to do it and them alone. My role was very much to almost pull the teachers away from the learning and let the young people really take control of the event 100%.
So these are 7- and 8-year-olds that you're working with at your event.
That's right, and it's something that when I tell people that, and today we've had the youngsters talking to other teachers in the north of England about what they did. The general impression is 7- and 8-year-olds, they're way too young to even watch a TED Talk, let alone come up with their own TEDx Talks. So the slide that we are looking at the moment really is the fundamental backbone, pedagogically, if you like, for attempting this. It is taking a risk, I think, for teachers because they're overcoming quite a lot of what they're used to as educators. First and foremost, learners, they want responsibility for their own learning. And in school, we can tend to spoon-feed and mollycoddle our youngsters a little bit too much. They want respect for their views about the way they learn and what they're going to learn. Again, the textbook tends to be king far too often in schools, and unfortunately increasingly so. So with the TEDx, it's a wonderful vehicle for allowing youngsters to undertake research about big, epic questions that they're passionate about. They want real things to explore, not pseudo-fake problems invented for them by teachers or textbooks that they go off and solve. Young people, even as young as 7, are old enough and smart enough to pick really interesting problems or remarkable things that they want to explore. We gave them huge choice, ultimate choice in what they wanted to explore, how they would explore it. Our job was very much to provide frameworks, thinking tools, some technological tools and wherewithal to go and find the kind of information they needed to research out. And they want challenge. Kids give talks in school assemblies, class meets all the time. What's different for a 7- or 8-year-old in giving a TED talk or a TEDx talk is that their talk is up alongside the experts. Their talk is being taken seriously, not just by kids the same age as them, but by adults. And when they know that audience is there, they really up the level of what they're trying to achieve. And then finally, they want to collaborate. They want to struggle with other people. And TEDx Talks, this particular project we undertook, most of the youngsters went into real depths and troughs of despair. They found this hard. This was tough cognitively. It was tough in terms of standing up in front of 200 people that you don't know and telling your personal story, but they came through it, and they came through it together. So that collaboration, absolutely key to pulling this off with children, particularly children as young as that.
Great. So you have a few more slides here. We want to walk you, go ahead and keep walking us through here, some of your key learning.
Sure. So the learning log is really core, not just for young people, but for the adults working with them. We kept a learning log. You can actually Google it and find it at thornyclose.posterous.com, and I think there's a link on the TEDx Kids page to that. We insisted on the educators reflecting weekly on what they were learning from the experience of letting go of the reins of learning, letting these young people develop their talks. Not everything worked first time round. There was a fair share of failure in bringing this together. There was also a fair deal of ditching what teachers believed was the right way to do something and doing it a new way, and crossing their fingers it worked. It was the first time for them to have really handed so much of the learning process and research over to young people instead of somewhat couching it themselves. The act of sharing publicly meant that they were sharing the load with not just each other, but with colleagues that we were bringing to them from our own personal learning networks through Twitter, through Facebook and the blogosphere. And it allowed us from afar, because I don't live in Sunderland, I live in Edinburgh, it allows me to see where people are at and if they need some help to keep going.
Great. Great. This is one of my favorites that you suggested, and I do this in my work. I make people watch talks without the sound. Tell us a little about how that worked for you.
Well, this is, I'm a modern languages teacher. I've spent years teaching kids French and German, kids who frankly don't want to learn French or German. And so when you're trying to understand the spoken word, it's really hard if you're actually having to listen to it straight away. And we've all had that experience when we've gone to a foreign country. We say the one word that we know in the foreign language, and then we get that torrent of language that we don't understand. Well, it's the same if you're a youngster watching a TED Talk. If you watch it with the audio switched on first time round, you're not going to understand much, and not just that, you're going to lose confidence. So we watched it without sound first of all. I just asked them constantly, what is it you're seeing? What is it you think is going on? Getting them to observe first and foremost, and eventually to infer what they thought was happening. And we used talks which were short, on the 6-minute mark, and which had a highly visual element. My favorite is David Gallo's Underworld Adventures. The kids too, actually, amongst their favorites. Then we watch it a second time with a volunteer from the class giving a kind of running commentary of what they're seeing. So they give the talk that they've just seen without sound. And then we watch it all together in a kind of cinematic experience, and we see how close their peer was to actually getting it right. And they're always astonished how close on the money they are with the content. It raises confidence in kids that actually they're capable of understanding things designed for adults, but it also raises the confidence of the volunteers who come forward to give their commentaries. And then the other thing was looking at the content, and there's a TED Talk, for example, about crows and how ingenious they are. And we examined that to look at how this, the structure was put together to make it compelling, how people used props, demonstrations, examples to make their points more compelling. And we also did that with media that wasn't TED Talks. So we looked at video games and how they were structured, and we looked at fairy tales like Little Red Riding Hood and took them back to their early childhood and examined why were these fairy tales so compelling, and could we steal some of those ingredients for our own TED Talks. So feel free to move that on. There we go. Here's more in depth about that process of using fairy tales. Most fairy tales have the same structure. They start out with a kind of opening hook. They introduce the hero immediately. They introduce the villain just afterwards very quickly. You build up danger points throughout the beginning of the story before you reach a big turning point. And then the turning point normally resolves itself at the end. And the idea of adjectives is a means of really helping people understand the story. Repetition which in fairy tales is consistent. So in the best TED Talks, it's also consistent. Repetition, repetition, repetition. And also looking at their use of tone. What happens if we read a story we all know in a monotone way, and what happens if we take our time and try and tell the story like our mums and dads told them to us.
So, Ewan, it's interesting. I use stories in my storytelling training, and adults don't really want to believe at first, at least, that there's a connection between how we give an adult talk and how a story, a fairy tale might be written, but there's so much connection to them. So for kids, it's a really easy connection.
Fairy tales for adults, they work too. My degree, my master's was in the fairy tales, so if it's good enough for a master's, it's good enough for TEDsters as well.
And you just touched upon the language. You cited a game that you used. I didn't put it in the deck here, but talk about how you used the game to get people to describe things differently.
Well, if you've got kids of your own, you know what it's like when they come home from school and you say, "Hey, how was school today?" and you get that fine, one monosyllabic answer. And what we were keen to do is really expand their vocabulary, but we didn't want to do it by giving them word lists, and we didn't want them just kind of, I don't know, reading more text with more adjectives. So I picked the medium that they're all crazy about, video games. We used Machinarium, very visual video game, not much action, so there's not much to get distracted by, if you like. And we really delved deep into it, put ourselves in the first person of the character within the video game opening sequence. And we just got kids to riff and really push them on their adjectives. So they might say, "Oh, it looks dusty." I'd be like, "Oh, come on, give me another word for dusty." And they would say, "Oh, it's a barren, dusty landscape." And we invented silly rules like you can't say any sentences for the rest of the day unless you use 2 adjectives, just to stretch their vocabulary. We gathered all their new vocabulary together on word boards within the classroom so that they were able to steal from each other. We didn't use words like borrow. We use words like steal because it means they'll actually use it. So, yeah.
That's great. So every TED Talk has to have a so what test, and no different with yours, right?
Say again, sorry?
I was saying that every TED Talk has to have a so what test.
Oh yeah.
So why should we care?
This period of scrutiny is really important. If you ask a 7-year-old what do you want to do a talk about, they'll tell you about their pet, their football club, or their mum. And so we introduced the so what test, which led to some tears as we told people that a talk about their mum wasn't going to cut it. But those talks became incredibly powerful because kids totally get that. They say it all the time when they're listening to teachers in class. So what? Who cares? So when they asked it of themselves and of each other, they were able to blend ideas together to create new talks out of them that actually passed that test. So yeah, I think a really important question. I think more adults should ask themselves about it before they call meetings in the office, before they write a PowerPoint presentation. It's not just
exactly.
TEDx talks. Yeah, the star moment.
And what I like
totally.
Oh, keep going. Sorry.
This is totally stolen from Nancy Duarte's book Resonate.
Right. Yeah.
She's now got a bunch of 7-year-old fans as well. What is the thing they'll always remember? We asked every kid to make sure that there was a crazy statistic, there was a disgusting element, so the girl who decided to make vomit to explore how the body copes with illness. That was her thing they'll always remember. It's certainly stuck in my mind. Introducing that element, really important. Did it pass the so what test? But the most important, and this is now something I'm trying to encourage schools and entire school districts to think about. How can we help young people find problems that are really worth talking about and really worth solving? If I were to go through most school textbooks, it's hard for me to say that any of the problems there actually matter. When you look out to the big bad world, there are plenty of really good problems that we could go about solving through learning in class, and each one of them would make an absolute killer TEDx talk. So that for me is core. What is the epic problem that you would solve if you could solve any problem in the world? And I ask teachers that, and I ask teachers to ask their students.
What's the big idea? So you have a quick point on making sure to have outcomes shared.
Yeah, the most amazing thing for them was when I said, hey, we've got a tweet from Amsterdam, which became, we've got a tweet from the Middle East, from Australia, from California, from Africa. That kind of qualitative data was coming in as we sat on the bus waiting to go to the venue. That really got them. So ongoing qualitative data about their progress, about how people cared about what they were doing, really important. And in terms of tangible data, we monitored their emotions with a questionnaire every time we worked with them and asked them to do the same. So we have an emotion graph showing that deep trough of despair and the wonderful coming out of that trough at the end. And we also have, of course, the fact that it's on YouTube. When they were asked today, oh, where can we see your videos? The 4 kids we had with us today, they said, YouTube, just search for it, we're there. Or go to the TEDx site, we're there. So the stats from that, being able to see real view counts, being able to see the number of people looking at their teacher's learning log, all that really important, more important than any summative test they might get at the end of it. Incidentally, it's worth pointing out that the children involved, in terms of the kind of high-stakes testing that we all have to do, they did a lot better than they were expected to have done across the board. So there's something in there about the process used here for mainstream education.
Great. So any other, I have a bunch of questions from the audience that I'd like to get to.
Okay.
Do us a
It'd
favor,
be great
Ewan,
to take them now, and
yeah.
that'll allow me just to wrap up and save my phone bill.
Right. Very quickly, how many speakers did you have at your event?
We had nearly 60, and it went on for 2.5 hours. So those were lots of very short, rapid-fire speakers.
And they were 3 minutes, 4 minutes each kind of thing?
They were, the shortest talks were 45 seconds. The average talk, about 3 or 4 minutes, which is a long time for a 7 or 8-year-old. And I think the longer talks from some of the, what you might traditionally call the brighter kids, they were in the 5-6 minute range.
And did you stream your event? And did you record your event, video record?
We recorded our event. We asked the students to organize all that as well. This was quite core to me. We could have put on a lot of professional recording gear and probably come up closer to the TEDx standard of quality. I thought it was more important that they learned the hard way about gathering that kind of quality of recording. What's interesting is they were not happy with the quality of recordings they've made. So they've now asked for more help. This is the kids. The kids have asked for more help in terms of both shooting and cutting better quality video. And that's the kind of work we're just about to start with. So next year, they'll be running the whole show, and not just that, they'll have been responsible for improving that quality.
And I'm going to ask you one more question before I let you off and save your phone bill. We appreciate you joining us this way. Is how did you choose who got to speak?
This was a difficult question, a wonderful question, by the way. I don't know who asked it, but thank you. This was really hard. One teacher wanted everyone to speak, regardless of the quality of the talk. I felt it would destroy the kids if they gave a poor talk. So we told the kids, you're all going to speak, don't screw it up. And the reaction was wonderful. None of them screwed it up. All of them totally exceeded what they thought they were capable of. And that little element of fear, that little element of also, we're all in this together, was hugely important. So before we did it, I was thinking we're going to select the best 20. Now that we've done it, I was very happy to have had everyone involved. But just make sure the kids are aware, it's got to be good. And that little ounce of pressure made a huge difference to their whole learning journey.
Great. Ewan, we're going to let you jump off. Thank you so much. We will send everyone Ewan's email address at the end if you have additional questions. And I'm supposed to tell you that Davey Sims says will, and I'll send you his email address once you talk to you.
Absolutely. I would love to hear from you all and happy to offer any advice or further questions by email or on Twitter in Macintosh. Thank you all for hosting this as well, and I'm glad we eventually got the tech to work.
Oh, thank you.
Good evening to you all.
So don't leave it. Don't
Bye-bye.
leave us. Good night, Ewan. Actually, good night to you, and good morning back to Mackenzie. I'm going to finish this slide here. This is courtesy of Reeves and Kelly, who are the consummate hosts of TEDxYouth events and TEDx events, and obviously they host the TEDactive. So that's them on the stage. They have a great slide show that I have condensed down into one slide. Thank you, Lauren, for sharing this. And you can read these. I don't have to read them for you, but this is what they've learned from hosting a TEDx event, and I like the intentionality of number one. I just want to point out about scheduling the chaos and noise to keep the kids awake, alert, and alive. And the last one, of course, is feed them a lot. And I think, Mackenzie, that was one of your learnings, too, is make sure that we have lots of food for the kids. So I'm going to go back to a few questions, and Mackenzie, I'm going to throw this one to you, as to how many you ended up with 10 speakers. Is that right, Mackenzie? Is Mackenzie still with us?
Yeah, 10 speakers. I have 10 speakers.
10 speakers. And how did you choose your speakers, Mackenzie?
Well, I met a lot of people while I was on my trip in Washington, D.C. for Ashoka's Best Buy Technology for a Better World Award that I was accepting. And I have a lot of friends in Homer with interesting stories that I got to speak. And my mom met Simon Jackson from the Spirit Bear Youth Coalition at a Wild Nine conference, and we invited him up here, and he's actually talking to Jane Goodall about maybe coming to our event next year, so we're super excited about that.
Terrific. Mackenzie, did you seek any sponsors? There's a question from the audience on, did you have sponsors, and if so, who were they?
Yeah, I think we had maybe 6 sponsors. We had Homer Foundation. We had Homer Council on the Arts. Haber Vision, my dad's company, helped sponsored it. We had Captain's Coffee sponsored it. Sourdough Express was the restaurant company that made the food for us. And we had a T-shirt company that also helped sponsor.
Great. So food, T-shirts,
coffee, sunglasses, location. The Homer High School donated their theater for us to be in.
Great. And there was an earlier question I just want to make sure we address, and for this, I'm going to ask Lauren to take this question, which is there an appropriate age limit for a TEDxYouth event? I'm not sure that I know the answer. Lauren?
That's an interesting question, because there are a few answers to it. Generally, TEDx Kids events are events for youth under the age of from 8 to 11. TEDxYouth events are usually for 11 to 18 is kind of what we classify as youth events, because then after that you get into university type events, which is 18 to 22. But I have seen youth events that are more young adult in terms of like 22 to 25, and it really depends on the community, but I think in general for most people it's going to be 11 to 18, but it's fine if the audience is older or younger, and obviously there are going to be some adults in the audience as well, so that kind of changes things. So I would say those are the general standards, but it does vary by community and depending on what is more common in your community.
And so I'm going to ask a deeper question on that. Is that defined by who's in the audience or who's speaking?
By who's in the audience and who the event is for, because these events, anyone can speak. I mean, and you've seen there's been a mix. Like, I know there have been youth events where it's been all adult speakers, or there have been youth events where it's all kids speakers, or there are ones where there's a mix. Personally, I think ones that work best are the ones where it's a mix of adult and youth speakers. But youth events and kids events are defined in that they are events for kids.
Great.
And sometimes by kids, as you've seen with these examples.
So that really does help. That definitely helps clarify. So, which we should have stated up front. the kids are for 8 to 11, youth are for 11 to 18 generally. University events are after that. So you may have hybrids in there too. I know that there's an event where some youth, is it SMU, where they're, the youth are actually programming for the kids. Is that correct?
Youth are, you mean a bit older people are performing?
Middle, right.
That the event is for and by kids, or that kids that are a little older are speaking for younger kids?
Either or. I guess there's a mix of anything that you could do here is what I'm just trying to get at.
Yeah, I mean, there's a total mix. There's an event where it's middle schoolers speaking to other middle schoolers. Obviously, this Kids at Sunderland was 8-year-olds speaking to other 8-year-olds and adults. You know, Youth at Castilleja, which happened last year, was adults speaking to kids 16 to 18. So there's going to be a lot of variations here, so you shouldn't feel kind of married to any, oh, it has to be like this. There are a lot of examples of how to execute it in terms of speaker and audience ratios, but it's with the general idea that it's for young people.
Great. So I'm looking at the questions here, if there are any more. Do parents attend these events with the youth? Or do they leave and come back? Mackenzie, you want to talk about how your event went?
I had a lot of parents at our event, and I welcome them to come because if we're learning as well, it's just a plus, and then they can pass it on to their kids, or if their kids aren't able to attend, that maybe the parents can come and send the information back to their youth. But I had both youth and their parents and adults at my TEDx event.
Great. And there's one other question. A youth day speaker range in ages. Our youth day speaker ranges in age from 8 to 23. It is our first. Do you think that range is okay?
Yeah, definitely.
There's nothing wrong with that, right?
No, it's great. I mean, if it's youth or young people speaking to other young people, it just gives them another way to relate to the people talking to them. So it's not just an adult telling them things they have to do, but another kid telling them like stories and relatable things because they're at the same age level.
And here's one other interesting question. There's a TEDxYouth event that's going to have 260 kids in the audience. Question is, should those who are speaking, the kids who are speaking, should they stay in the audience or should they be backstage in a green room?
No.
Do you have any opinion about that, Mackenzie?
Yeah, in my event, we stayed in the audience and walked up on stage. I think it's great for the speakers to be in the audience, so maybe they can have a little side conversation, or you can see that they're watching and being a part of it too.
And I just want to chime in here that TEDx events like TED, speakers are members of the audience. So there's no exception for youth events. Anyone who's a speaker goes right back into the audience. At TED, speakers come up from the audience, and that's just the nature of TED and TEDx. So yeah, there should be no green room. It's completely integrated. Your speakers will be there during breaks, talking to people. That's kind of the thing that makes a TEDx event great, is the integration between speakers and audience.
We reserve seats for our speakers in the front or the side so that they can easily get on and off stage, but we require that all speakers hear all talk, just like they do at TED. So we always get this question on the webinars, and I'm not surprised we got it because I mentioned the number 260. So it does trigger, for those of you who are wondering why this page is up here, the TEDx resources will answer all of the questions about the TEDx rules and best practices. There's enormous resources within these 5 bullet points here. The question that came through is, aren't TEDx events have a limit of 100? And I'll let Lauren answer this briefly.
I I think that maybe the person that brought up the question, TEDx events are limited to under 100 people if the primary licensee has not attended a TED conference. If the primary licensee has attended a TED conference, you can have more than 100 people. So, and that rule is also found on the TEDx rules and guidelines. So there will be TEDx events with more than 100 people because the primary licensee has attended TED.
Great. Well, let's go back to a youth and kids question, and I don't know if there's a real direct answer to this. They're planning a TEDx kids event, and they want to know what kind of arrangements could be made if parents do want to attend. I think that's probably up to you as to how you want to organize the audience and the seats and how long the event is. Certainly if it's an hour or if it's an all-day event, it's going to depend. Lauren or Mackenzie, do you have any things to add about that?
I know there was a TEDx event for kids where there was a main room, and at TED and at TEDx events there can always be a simulcast room if people don't want to sit in the main theater and they would rather kind of lounge and watch a simulcast. And this event in particular had kids in the main room, and the adults were in this kind of other, still in the same venue area, simulcast room. So it's all kids in the theater and then adults in a simulcast room was one way that it was dealt with. But maybe you could even break up the audience into sections, kids in the front, adults in the back, or you can just let them sit as they sit. So there's a lot of options, and it's kind of what's best. With a lot of these things with the youth, it's still, you know, there have been some TEDx events, but obviously we don't have as many examples as we do of just plain TEDx events. So you guys are really deciding how you want to execute this format as you go along. So it's really what's best for your local community when it comes to these kinds of questions.
Yeah, in our event, we had the audience integrated together in the main auditorium, and then we also had social spaces where they could go outside of the main auditorium and sit if they were just too tired of hearing awesome information, and they could watch it on the live stream on their computer while they talked about what they were learning.
Great. We just have a few more minutes. Does the audience have any more questions? It looks like we've gotten through most of the topics. Lauren, do you want to spend a few minutes and let your colleague speak, whose name I can't remember right now?
Oh, sure. So any of you that are TEDx Youth Day organizers, we have Chloe, who's a TEDx Youth Day coordinator, and she can she's going to kind of be helping communicating out to you guys and, you know, running the Facebook and Twitter. So if you guys have questions, you know, she'll be reaching out to you specifically about TEDx Youth Day. You can email her at chloe@ted.com. And the other team is also here to support, but she's going to be the one that will be reaching out to you via Youth Day. So maybe she could just introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chloe. And I've been in touch with a bunch of you probably, and from now until TEDx Youth Day, which is about 2 months away, basically I'll just be reminding you of what you've got to do and asking you guys what your plans are if you're going to be anchor events. Anchor events are the ones that are going to commit to live streaming. We'd love as many of you as possible to do that. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me anytime.
So Chloe, let's do this for the people on the call that don't know what Youth Day is. Can you just give us a quick rundown?
Sure. Youth Day is an annual event that started last year in 2010, and it's an event that basically celebrates Universal Children's Day by having TEDx events focused on kids and youth all around the world at the same time. So this year it's the 3 days around TEDx Youth Day, the 19th of November through the 21st. And these events can have all kinds of different unique themes, but they're all going to be unified this year around a theme which is play, learn, build, and share. And so each event this year is going to be finding some way to incorporate that global theme into their event. But the individual events can have their own themes.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Chloe before we wrap up? Anything else? I think that's it. Well, we like to finish when the questions are done, and it looks like they are. So Mackenzie, good luck in school. Please get there and start your day. Thank you to Kat as well, Mackenzie's mom, for shepherding him to this moment. And Lauren and Chloe, it's always a pleasure to have collaboration with the TED staff on these TEDx webinar series. So this will be archived online, hopefully by tomorrow, and we'll send out a reminder with everyone's email addresses if you'd like to contact the panelists in the future. Again, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you for the next webinar, which we will look for a notice via email when that gets confirmed. Lauren, anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay, thanks everyone. Take care. Have a great day or night, wherever you may be.